think it was 2015, the Post Office executive, Paula Venables, told the committee that she believed that the prosecutions were sound. I mean, things have changed dramatically, obviously. Do you think the Post Office attempted to mislead Parliament and the public to cover up its own failings?
I can't specifically comment on that. I think what's become very evident, clearly, is that we've got a number of cases that have come to light. We've seen 2,500 colleagues come forward in the Horizon shortfall scheme. We've seen a number of overturned convictions. Clearly, Sir Wynne will be looking very carefully at what has happened, and I think we're all very keen to get to the bottom of this. I've been very, very clear since I joined the organisation that the Post Office simply can't move forward until such time as proper redress has been determined and, has, more importantly, has been paid out and given to those victims of this scandal. We know that, and certainly from our perspective, we will provide everything we can to Sir Wynne so that he can make these pronouncements. I know it's a frustration for the committee that, certainly in my instance, I wasn't in the organisation and you would like specific answers. It's very difficult to do that. But
we would expect you to know the history given your full cooperation with the inquiry, Mr. Reid.
Well, absolutely, and that is exactly what we're doing. We are providing all and full cooperation with the inquiry, and that's clearly the right place for us to apportion blame when Sir Wynne has made his pronouncements. That's very, very clear, and we want to make sure that he does that and does that well.
Chair, can I just say, I've asked 3 or 4 questions. I haven't had one answer yet. And the reality is you've got the head of the Post Office, head of Fujitsu, that department, and the answers have been absolutely negative. If we bring in people in front of the committee, we would expect them at least to have a knowledge of the history of what's happened. Something as big as this, and the answers have been, I haven't had any answers to the questions which I've asked, and I'm not frustrated, I'm absolutely appalled at the answers which I've received. Thanks.
From your point of view, when do you think Post Office staff first knew that remote access to Horizon terminals was possible?
I couldn't give you an exact date on that.
Why can you not answer that question? It is fundamental to this case.
What is fundamental from our perspective is we are facilitating Sir Wynne getting to the bottom of all of these issues.
How long have you been the chief executive now?
Because coming into the organisation...
How long have you been the chief executive now?
4 years.
You must surely have had time in 4 years to cut to the heart of this issue, which is, when did the Post Office know remote access to terminals was possible?
My role, certainly coming into the Post Office, is to do a number of things. Of course, it is to speed up as much as we can and as quickly as we can the compensation that's being paid. That must be the right start point.
Surely you must be telling Sir Wynne's inquiry when somebody in the Post Office knew that remote access to terminals was possible.
We will be providing Sir Wynne with all the information that he requires.
But what's the answer?
I haven't got that specific date. I can come back to you with what we have supplied in the same way as Mr. Patterson has described, that we will come back to you. I can do the same.
I think we are both surprised and disappointed that you've not got that question answered on the table.
Yeah.
You appeared before the committee to go to Mr. Lavery's earlier point in January 2022 and told us that victims' payments to make up the shortfalls, much of which came from life savings, people remortgaging their properties, was put into the general suspense accounts on which the Post Office did not hold records beyond 2005. Why would the Post Office not track money? I thought that was quite an important thing for the Post Office to do.
I agree with you, and it's something that we need to get to the bottom of. As I said, there were, to my understanding, 2 reviews that happened between 2015 and 2019, trying to understand exactly what the outcomes of the suspense accounts were. I think it's inconclusive, and I think it's frustrating.
How regularly is it that the Post Office does not track money within its company?
Well, clearly that's something that we do regularly now. I mean, we are running a business today, and clearly what...
Was it not a business back before? Was it not a business back then?
I can't comment on the specifics of what was happening over 10 years ago, but certainly from my perspective, you can be assured that the protocols and controls have now been put in place. We have addressed all the issues that were part of the 2019 Common Issues Judgment and the Horizons Issue Judgment, the recommendations that were made by Fraser say that actually the system, as Mr. Patterson has remarked, is stable, is clunky, sure, but it is stable and it does the job that it does. And we've been involving our postmasters in those solutions to make sure that actually it is doing the job that postmasters needed to do today, but we are very, very clear that we can upgrade that system, which is why we are intending to get off Horizon and move to a new system.
Any executives, directors on the board who were present at the time, who were then informed, as we'll hopefully hear from yourself, Mr. Reid, regarding the board minutes about this system, and yet continue the facade that everything was fine, are they unfit to hold directorships in any company, both public and private? Do any of the individuals in the post office, the senior executives on the board, should they ever be allowed to sit on any board of any company if they were aware and yet did not come forward and did not seek to address this issue at the time? Are they fit for those directorships, which will come with whopping salaries and whopping bonuses in any company?
Well, if evidence is produced that there was some form of cover-up, then clearly action needs to be taken.
Okay.
Even those who sat there and were told that things were going wrong, and yet private prosecutions were still allowed to go ahead.
Well, that's exactly what I've just said. So I think if there's a situation where there is culpability, then clearly people will need to be held to account.
And will you be allowed to let the committee Chair, know when Fujitsu first raised concerns with the system with the post office? Again, I'm assuming that would have been brought to the board's attention.
Well, I will, as I say, we will look into that and come back to you, Mr. Gullis.
Do you believe that the post office prosecuted the innocent, knowing the case to be flawed?
I sincerely hope not, but I have not had evidence to that effect.
Why do you think the post office fought the provision of compensation to those who were unfairly punished for so long?
Why did they fight it, sorry?
Yeah.
The provision of compensation for so long.
Exactly. Why has the post office dragged its feet for so long in providing compensation to those who would due redress?
A culture of denial. I can only assume that is the case. It's a lack of understanding and perhaps a lack of curiosity of really what is going on. And I think that is the most important cultural challenge that I have in my organisation, is to ensure that everybody in the organisation sees and understands absolutely what has been going on. And I don't think that was the case, certainly when I joined in 2019.
Are you cooperating in full with the inquiry?
Absolutely.
Because there has been some press reports that people have not been working overtime or at the weekends in order to provide the evidence the inquiry requires.
I can assure you we are working extremely hard to make sure that the inquiry has everything it needs to come to the conclusions it needs to come to about what went wrong, why it went wrong, and more importantly, who was responsible. There is nothing to be gained reputationally for the post office, or indeed anybody in my organisation, to drag their feet at all. The only way that the post office can move forward is by ensuring that the inquiry has what it needs to draw its conclusions, and more importantly, that redress is given.
In your last accounts, did you offset a provision for compensation against the tax that you paid to the Exchequer?
So, and it's important that we do make this observation. There was a characterisation, I think, that bonuses have been somehow inflated as a consequence of the treatment of tax and the treatment of compensation. Let me assure you right now that that is absolutely not the case. We have not done that at all. The tax treatment that we have for compensation, we are, as it states very clearly in the report and accounts, we are having those conversations with HMRC. I indeed wrote to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury about 18 months ago to discuss this exact topic about how do we treat the compensation payments, and indeed how we treat the payments of those. So that is
so the bonuses and the tax were calculated off the same
bonuses
line.
Bonuses have nothing to do at all with tax treatment. With the only financial.
But the question is whether bonuses and tax were calculated off the same profit line.
No, they weren't.
They were calculated on two different profit lines.
The bonus for the financial metric associated with the bonus was on a trading profit as opposed to on a compensation line, or indeed it was a pre-tax, not a post-tax line.
So you see the concern that you've basically been underpaying your taxes and overpaying bosses.
I can see where the concern is, but I can assure you that is not the case. People need to see and feel what has happened to some of these victims.
Was the existence of this issue then, Mr. Reid, dominating all thoughts that you and your senior management team had about the nature of the business that you were being asked to manage?
I don't think it was dominating everything in 2019 when I joined. No.
It was an insignificant part.
No, I wouldn't say it was insignificant, but I think to your point, I don't think it was dominating everything, right. And that's why it is, and right. It was so important to change that.
You've sat throughout the evidence already today, and did you hear Lord Arbuthnot when talking about the unequal relationship that exists between postmasters and the post office itself? He spoke about the post office as being this most trusted brand.
Yes.
Was it a most trusted brand then, and is it a most trusted brand now?
I think his principle was absolutely right, which is it's not the corporate entity that is trusted, it's the relationship between customers and their local postmasters. That is what the brand is, and I think we need to.
So you recognise the value of the postmaster in the way that Lord Arbuthnot
absolutely
described?
Do. The post office is the postmaster.
All right. So why did one of these people who's been delivering your most trusted brand, Jo Hamilton, say that when she was being inquiries were being made of the reconciliation within her branch, she felt as though a financial gun was being held to her head?
I mean, it's appalling. Is the obvious comment that I would make, and I have enormous empathy for what Jo went through, and I have to say that we've all listened to what has occurred in the inquiry and the evidence gathering that has occurred in the inquiry, as well as the evidence that has been provided by former colleagues, and it's appalling.
We've also heard today that there was a belief that the motive of the investigators, where something was identified as a failure, some missing happens in all sorts of businesses, in all sorts of accounts, as you will well know, but that the motive of investigators was that of asset recovery rather than trying to identify what might have happened. How can that be the attitude of a most trusted brand?
Deeply concerning. I agree with you entirely. It is deeply concerning.
Do you accept that characterisation of the investigators?
I think we've heard evidence in the inquiry to that point, and so that is what has been provided. So I think it's very clear to me that there is a reason why we've not prosecuted anybody in the post office, certainly not under my watch, and certainly not before 2015, and we have no intention of doing so. And I think culturally we've got a long way to go to ensure that actually we put our postmasters first. To your point, they are the brand. The postmasters are the brand. The relationship between postmasters and their customers is what matters. And certainly we at the corporate entity need to recognise that we are here to serve those postmasters.
Mr. Reid, you joined the post office in 2015.
2019.
2019. But you've reviewed board minutes going back beyond that point.
Yeah, certainly specific ones, yeah.
So I know you can't give us an exact date, a month or a year when you first saw Horizon referenced in any kind of board paper. But do you have a recollection that at some point before 2015 there was a reference to Horizon and some possible issues? You must have a vague recollection, having reviewed all that documents, of whether Horizon was even mentioned. I'm not asking for a date, but pre-2015, was there any mention of possible issues with Horizon?
In the board minutes?
In any documents that you've seen?
In documents that I've seen, yes, that we have submitted to Sir Win, yes, we've done.
So in 2015, when one of your predecessors, Paula Vendels, told this committee that prosecutions were sound, was Parliament misled?
I don't know if I can specifically comment on that. I think what's clearly occurred in the...
You're under parliamentary privilege.
What's clearly occurred in the evidence that has been provided to the inquiry, and what we've seen and what we've heard, is that individuals who've been prosecuted, and those individuals that go all the way back, have been prosecuted on the basis of information that may be erroneous. Yes, that is, I think, something that we've heard in the inquiry.
But from the information you've seen, would you have said to this committee that all prosecutions were sound in 2015, having seen what you've now seen?
I don't think I can give you a straight answer on that because there's so much more context, I think, that's required. As I say, we've been very, very, very clear that Sir Win is going to get to the bottom of these details, and that is what we think is the right thing to do. I don't think it's my place to prejudge that. He spent 2.5 years
Do you think the culture in the
doing
Post Office at the time, back in 2015, when your predecessor Paula Mills came to Parliament, do you think the culture in the Post Office at the time was to cover up failings, to protect the brand?
I can't comment on what
I'm asking for your opinion.
As I say, I think it's unreasonable for me to do that, given that
having read through board minutes and documents that would indicate to you that there was knowledge the system was unsound, you can't say that it was wrong to say in 2015 all prosecutions were sound.
Well, I think what has become apparent is all prosecutions weren't sound, and that is clearly what.
And so, for someone to say that in 2015,
whether or not that was a pure knowledge, I can't comment, and I think we'll have to wait and see when those executives come before the inquiry. As I mentioned before, they will be coming before the inquiry in the next 3 months or so, and so people will be able to see and speak firsthand. They will be writing witness statements. They will be commenting on what they knew, what they didn't know. And so when we'll be able to build
using
his
the
picture.
inquiry as a way to not be curious, to
No,
try and
not.
avoid answering questions, or yourself getting under
No,
the
I'm not.
bonnet of the issues at the time?
No, I'm not. My job is to make sure that, as I said, that redress is speedily delivered to our victims, and most importantly, that I run the Post Office of today. That is my job. My job is not the investigative role that is being played by Sir Win. That is clearly his job. He initiated an independent inquiry. It's now a statutory inquiry, and I think it's appropriate that that is the forum in which
25 years.
that he addresses things.
The business. 25 years. Sorry. And you're running the business. Sorry, Anthony.
Do you think the Post Office abused its position to prosecute in order to cover up its own failings?
So I think it's unreasonable to ask these questions when the knowledge is going to be addressed in the inquiry specifically. That is, the individuals will be asked those
But I'm
questions.
asking you, as the current chief executive, who has said you're not going to pursue private prosecutions.
We aren't
so
presuming.
do you think you abused your position as an organisation in running prosecutions to cover up?
There was nothing unique about private prosecutions. Individuals and companies can bring private prosecutions. That is something that can occur. Do I think it was done egregiously? I've listened, obviously, to the inquiry. I've listened to the details of many of the victims, and clearly there is an issue that needs to be addressed, and that is what is going to happen as we go through this process.
But I'm asking, is the person who leads the organisation today, you must have a view on why the prosecutions were being... Was it a culture of trying to cover up the organisation's own failings because it had a lack of technical knowledge? Was it people so scared of their own lack of knowledge that they thought the easy option, rather than flag concerns up, was just to prosecute?
I think there are many numbers of issues here that we can address. Is it the competency of the investigators? Is it the competency of the auditors? Is it the information that was being supplied? Is it the guidance that they were getting and the oversight that they were receiving? Is it the asset collection? We've talked about all of these things. There are multiple reasons why, and I think it's really important that we allow Sir Win to ask the individuals those questions so that he builds that picture. My job, and I've been very clear, we're not prosecuting people within the Post Office. We have not brought private prosecutions within the Post Office. On my watch, that has not occurred, and it will not occur. We're very, very clear about that. My job is not to go back and investigate what happened in the organisation pre-2015, pre-2010. I can see that's immensely frustrating for you. But my job today is to run the Post Office today, to make sure that we have a Post Office that is fit for purpose, and more importantly, that we have postmasters who can go about doing the job they want to do, free of fear of any kind of relationship that they may have had in 2015 or before.
It's disappointing, Mr. Reid. It sounds like you are trying to suggest, because there is an inquiry ongoing, that you don't need to look back over the history, that the inquiry will deal with all of that. But you're running the organisation today that has a culture and a history. And yes, the Post Office may have changed, but it is the same organisation. It is the same organisation, I assume, with thousands of people who worked for it at the time all of this happened. And the fact that you're not willing to look under the bonnet and answer questions because the inquiry should look at it indicates a lack of corporate curiosity that I think is worrying.
I would disagree with that. characterisation. I think it's very clear to me. I have some 1,700 colleagues who have been in the organisation for more than 10 years, and I'm acutely conscious that my job is to make sure that the culture that we have today is to put our postmasters first. So there are a series of recommendations that came out of the 2019 findings by Judge Fraser, which we are absolutely implementing, and more importantly, my job is to create a culture where people are supporting and serving postmasters, and that is my role. My job is not to investigate going backwards. I don't think it's about addressing those issues. It's about making sure we have an organisation today that is fit for purpose.
Okay, so let me ask you a question
the
on
most
today.
important thing.
Does the Post Office still use non-disclosure agreements in reaching settlements with sub-postmasters?
Not to my knowledge.
So no
Not to my
non-disclosures have been requested or signed since you took over
to
as
my
Chief
knowledge.
Executive? Would you check that and come
I'll
back?
do.
Thank you very much indeed. You have left us, I think, fairly shocked, actually. You've not been able to supply the committee with key events in the timeline, such as when the Post Office first knew that remote access was possible. You've told us that you haven't kept evidence safe about what money was paid to you inappropriately and therefore is owed back. And you can't estimate the scale of compensation. We are grateful for the moral commitment from Fujitsu that they will share in the compensation payment, but that leaves us many questions which we need to put to the Minister, which is the subject of our next session. That concludes this session.